you done now? Oh, Brad, what have you done now?
As they said in the film, Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
Marty! You've got to come back with me!
The future!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast, the only podcast looking back in time at the greatest film trilogy of all time, Back to the Future. I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore, and boy, do we have a show for you today. Today, joining me on Back to the Future, the podcast, is Kevin Smets. Kevin Smets is currently the Inner Geekdom champion of the world in the Movie Trivia Schmodown. You've heard me talk about the Movie Trivia Schmodown here before, and we had a fun ride in an Uber not too long ago where we thought about this idea of what if we were to recast Back to the Future for 2020 and for a new generation. Obviously, Back to the Future is a perfectly casted movie. They hit it out of the park. No one can ever do those characters better than we saw them in Back to the Future's Part 1, 2, and 3. But we decided if they were going to remake the movie, come hell or high water, and we were the studio in charge of this project, how could we best cast this film? So Kevin went and he cast his version of the film. I cast mine, and we met in the middle and we decided this was going to be our movie. So this is a long one, guys. Kevin and I really had fun with this. Don't beat us up too much about some of our picks, because honestly, if you were to sit down and try to cast at least the top 6 roles in Back to the Future, it's next to impossible. There are some obvious choices. There are some not so obvious choices. We did our absolute best to come up with something new, fresh, and different for a Back to the Future 2020. Now, hopefully, we will never be in this predicament, but if we are, here are some names that we could see in a Back to the Future potential remake. But before I get to Kevin Smets, I want to make sure that everyone's aware that I have a book coming out about Back to the Future on April the 14th. It is called Back from the Future, a celebration of the greatest time travel story ever told, and you can get that book right now on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, IndieBound.com, or you can go to BackFromTheFutureBook.com and pre-order your copy today. It'd be great if you went to Amazon, give it a pre-order. It'll arrive the day that the book comes out, and you can enjoy the fan's guide to Back to the Future. But until that book comes out, you're going to enjoy this podcast every single week with new episodes. And today, again, Kevin Smets joins me on the show. Don't send too many hate tweets his or I way, because we did our absolute best to recast Back to the Future 2020. I take you to Kevin Smets right now. And he joins me on the line right now. He is the current Inner Geekdom champion of the entire world. He is the Smasher, Kevin Smets. Kev, how's it going, man?
The entire world. Wow, that's a lot to live up to. Are you saying that there's someone out there in South Africa that's probably chomping at the bit to get my title? Because that's pretty awesome. Good to see you, buddy.
I think there is, man. I'm excited. I want to tell the people a little bit about your backstory and why we have you on the podcast. But I think I got to start off by telling a personal anecdote about one Kevin Smets that just occurred. I don't know, a few weeks ago. I was at the draft, I think that we were at, and we were leaving. So this Movie Trivia Schmodown, it's a movie trivia competition. I've played Frank Janish on this show before in a Back to the Future trivia match. So I'm hoping the listeners are up to date on exactly what the Schmodown is. But anyway, people take it seriously, and there was a whole draft for all these competitors. And I was hanging out with Frank and Kevin after the show, and we were heading back in an Uber to your apartment. Now, there's 2 great parts of this story, and this is kind of the genesis of why I wanted you to get on this show and do this podcast where we're going to recast Back to the Future. But we're in this car.
So excited.
And we're talking about all kinds of things, and we were talking about rebooting Back to the Future, and we were going back and forth. And one of the things you said is like, hey, let's just make it take it out of Hill Valley, and let's go across the pond. Let's go to the UK, and instead of Hill Valley, they can have it in Parlington Square. Was the name that you came?
Arlington Square.
Where did that come from? Where did Parlington Square come from?
Dude, I don't know. Like, cause you wanted a square because that's how like Hill Valley is. It has the little park area with the clock tower, and then I was just like, so square. And then I just remember on the trains when I would go down to visit my sister when she lived in Wimbledon, there'd be so many weird like names. There's like one would be like now getting off Cockfoster, and like just these weird like Brighton and Parlington. It just sounded like Parlington Square. Mind the gap, please, for Parlington Square. So that's the genesis of it. And then there is a Parlington Square, but like I looked it up actually. Hold on, let me see if I can find it again. There's no like Parlington Square that I said, but there is a Parlington Square meal or mirror you can buy, and there's a Parlington Hall in West Yorkshire. So Parlington is a word, but I totally made it up because I was drunk and it was off the cuff.
Well, what's funny is right now, if you type in Parlington Square in Google, you'll probably laugh what the first result is. The first result is actually I went and made the Parlington Square mug that you have in your home, and actually people can buy it. And
that's you?
Yeah. I had to make it on TeePublic so I could get it to you and ship it to you. So that's kind of funny because I just try to do.
Look at it, it says Parlington Square hoodie for me. I don't know what the first link is for you. On mine, it literally is Parlington Square the hoodie, TeePublic.
So
now that I look at it,
you might need to get one of those. Get a Parlington Square hoodie. But anyway, so we're laughing about Parlington Square, and then we start talking about recasting Back to the Future, which is why we're going to do this show. And then the first thing, and Back to the Future fans out there, all the pinheads worldwide will love this. The first thing that Kevin Smets offered me when I went into his apartment was a plate of peanut brittle. So. I think everybody is a Back to the Future. Where did you get the peanut brittle? I think I've been alive on this planet for nearly 3 decades, and no one has ever offered me peanut brittle in my entire life.
Oh man, I got it for Christmas. My dad always gives me peanut brittle every year for Christmas. So it's always in my pantry for literally months on end. And then when I knew you were coming over, I was like, oh, this is great. And I told Frank I was going to do it. Although Frank was right, it was supposed to be in a bowl. I thought it was a plate. So I show up with a plate of peanut brittle. It was brilliant. And then you showed me that deleted scene, which is great too.
Yeah, there's a deleted scene of George McFly being shaken down by one of his neighbors in order to buy a whole case of peanut brittle, I guess for his daughter or something like that. So anyway, though, so this was kind of the genesis of the podcast. But before we get into recasting the future, which I'm sure you and I might have dozens of hate tweets for, and I've already apologized at the top of the show saying, hey, obviously Back to the Future is a perfectly casted movie, and we are not trying to recast what was already perfectly. But I'm saying if we were to update it for modern times, they're doing a reboot, they're doing a part 4, they're doing a remake, something. That's what we're going to get into here in a second. But what is your history with Back to the Future? I mean, for me, it was seeing it on the Disney Channel when I was a young kid. I saw all 3 in a row, went to the Blockbuster, rented them again, and this was all I've ever thought about since. For you, what's the background? Where did you get exposed?
My dad actually, he had the VHS player, for the first movie, and I would watch that movie so much. And remember, in 1985, there was a 4-year lull before they made another one. So, for the first 2 years, and as a kid, I didn't have access to magazines. I didn't know if they would ever have one. And I can't remember if this is a Bernstein Bears thing, but when the VHS released, when it came out, did it always say to be continued? It always did, right? And so for me as a kid, I just remember thinking when's the continuation going to happen? And you just never heard about it. I never knew if one was going to come out. So when the sequel came out, dude, oh my God, I was so amped, that whole lead up to it. And then I just loved the music, and then my dad had a laser disc of it, I believe too. And then I remember after the last day of 5th grade for me, so this is how old I am. After the last day of either 5th or 4th grade, I forget which, the whole class, we got to go to see the theater to see Back to the Future Part 3. So that was a really cool thing. Because I remember correctly, that was in the summer. It's either 2 or 3 that we saw, but it was at the end of school, and we saw it at the mall theater, so it was like a dingy theater. But, as a kid, it was the greatest thing ever. And I just remember, by the way, at Back to the Future 2, at the end, when they had the they had the trailer for 3, and I was freaking out about how cool it was going to be in the Old West.
Yes. Yeah. Well, to fact check you a little bit, so it must have been probably part 3 that you saw in summer 1990 is when that one came out. Part 2 came out in the winter of '89. We're actually coming up.
Yeah. So that's there it is.
We're coming up on the 30th anniversary of Back to the Future 3. Is almost here. You know, it came out in 1990, and here we are in 2020. So pretty crazy. So I think it's cool that everybody.
I love 3 too.
3. I want to get into a debate about 3 because I talked to somebody last week on the podcast, Jason from Back to the Future HQ. I've had a lot of conversations recently about Back to the Future Part 3, so we'll talk about that too after we recast this movie. But I think everybody when they're kids, I don't know, they find that one franchise that they just kind of stick to. For some people, it was Star Wars. My brother, it was Star Wars. Indiana Jones. James Bond is kind of the thing that you share with your father, maybe. Was Back to the Future always your trilogy, or was always your franchise, or were you interested in other films?
Oh, I was interested in others. Star Wars as a kid was great for me, too. Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Back to the Future were pretty much my tops. Back to the Future Part 2 came out the winter after The Last Crusade. That was '89. So I was still into the Indiana Jones movies too. And so it was a trilogy of trilogies, really. It was Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Back to the Future for me. But I used to draw my own comics, and I had my own comic. I created a whole total off top, but it was called Tales in Time, and it was like a jetpack instead of it was like a combination of Boba Fett with the DeLorean, so the jetpack was the time machine. But I'd always be into, so I would say though, growing up, Back to the Future was usually the third on my priorities. It was I always wanted to be Indiana Jones, Star Wars, and then Back to the Future, that trilogy was right under it. But my fandom for it was huge. I'd always hum the theme all the time and create crazy stories. Yeah. And I watched those movies to death. It was those 3 trilogies and Tremors that I just watched all the time.
Okay. I like the little addition there at the end. Yeah, man, it's just so cool how, this story, what do you think it is about Back to the Future? That's what I ask everybody. Why is this film, or why are these movies, why do they stick with us now going on the 35th anniversary of Back to the Future Part 1? I just said coming up on the 30th anniversary of Back to the Future Part 3. Why do they still hold up?
I don't know. As I say that now, Back to the Future is higher on that list of trilogies. I would say Star Wars, then Back to the Future, then Indiana Jones. And I think it's because the older I get, I loved Back to the Future before I ever experienced high school. And then after going to high school and you see the movies with a different eye from there. And now, as an older man, seeing the movies from every generation sees the movie a different way, and you'll see the movie yourself, Brad, different way too. When you have kids, you'll probably watch it a completely different way. So I think it reaches everybody because it hits us when we're children, it hits us when we were adolescents, and then it hits us when we're young adults, and then adults, in every single way. And it's just like you said, we're recasting a movie that's almost perfectly cast. Everybody is just so pitch perfect in their roles. And I think that's just what stood the test of time. And then the music, you hear the music, and commercials have fun with that music and stuff like that. There's just something about the score and everything else that is, for me, it stands the test of time. And then I've come to appreciate, I think Back to the Future Part 1, the very first one, might be one of the most perfectly written scripts and movies ever created. You know what I mean? There's just not, just even the seeds from the beginning to the end, everything's just so great.
Yeah, I mean, Bob Zemeckis did a great job crafting that script, crafting that story, and then the great Robert Zemeckis, did, one of the greatest jobs of all time directing, especially the first movie, which I think many people are like, hey, if there's no such thing as a perfect movie, but if there is, Back to the Future is high up on the list. And let me ask you this real quick, because you work in Hollywood, you're in Los Angeles, California right now, or just outside of it, and you're editor by trade. Talk to me about how the film, when you look at it from your editor's eye, is it well cut together? Is there something that you're like, oh, I could trim that off, trim this off? This scene could be better with, maybe a little extra dialogue. I don't know. I mean, is there anything that stands out to you as an editor, or is it this is a perfect film? It was great just the way it is.
I mean, For me, like, yeah, like it's funny. Like Star Wars, one of my favorite movies, right? But like as an editor, like in A New Hope, when they're right outside the cantina, and Obi-Wan says, "Watch yourself. This place can get a little rough." And then Luke says, "Oh, I'm ready for anything." And then they have this long tracking shot of them walking into the cantina. As an editor, all the time I'm like, I think the edited version of it should have been, "Watch yourself. This place can be a little rough." And then you just hard cut into the dun 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 dun. Like for me as an editor, I'm like, that would be perfect. There's nothing like that in Back to the Future. Like when I watch it, like I sometimes I just put my hands in the air. I'm like, I'm just blown away by how everything is perfect. Even just like the way the music is intercut, and like when he's outside the Bluebird Motel and if the car's not starting, and the, you know, the way they can go back and forth to something high energy with Doc on the clock tower to just a simple scene of a guy that his car's not starting, but they can add that drama. And like, yeah, like, you know, like you said, like, I don't know if there's such thing as a perfect movie, but like, I don't see, like, even if I could find something that I can nitpick about Star Wars, but I can't do that about Back to the Future as an editor anyway, then that just tells me how much I really do appreciate the movie as a whole.
Yeah, and you're right about the music too. The music cues are so perfectly placed. I mean, I'm a big James Bond guy, but I watched some of those early Sean Connery movies, and they bring in the Bond theme, which now you associate with some sort of action occurring. They bring in the Bond theme in like Dr. No when he's literally unpacking his suitcase at his hotel room in Jamaica.
Yeah.
It's literally the most anticlimactic action of all time, but they're like da 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 da, and it's just like, what is going on? But anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Now, let me say one more thing before we finally get to our casting of this film, because I think this is going to be interesting, because we sort of had this conversation in that Uber on the ride to your apartment there in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Oh, I've upgraded a lot of my choices now. I'm so excited to share some of these with you now.
I've kept some. I've toyed with others. Now I'm not solidified on all my choices, but we'll talk about it. But the last thing is, so you're the Inner Geekdom champion of the world in the movie trivia Schmodown. What that is all the comic book films, superhero films, space odysseys, Middle Earth films. All of those are in a specific league, and you are now the champion of that league. It was your rookie year. You went to the championship. Yes. You won it at the Spectacular, which is the equivalent of WrestleMania or the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. You won it there, and
that rhythmic. What does he say? The rhythmic
ceremonial ritual.
Yes,
so good, so great. But so anyway, and I don't want to bore the listeners here too much, because this isn't Back to the Future related directly. But when that championship was being crafted, I work in pro wrestling, as a lot of people know, and I had a hand in getting those belts made. They're made by my guy who does all the championships, and for Reality of Wrestling and Booker T. And I remember working with Brian Ward on the designs, and Brian Ward, I think I already told you this, but Brian Ward sent over the design, and it had at the very top of it, you know, it has the Starship Enterprise on one side, and on the other side was the Millennium Falcon. Well, in the middle of the championship is Darth Vader. So I remember talking to Brian Ward and Frank Janish and going, "Hey man, you know, we already have Darth Vader on here. What about a little Back to the Future representation? Let's take off that hunk of junk that they call the Millennium Falcon, and let's put on the DeLorean time machine." And that is actually what's still on the championship. It made the final cut, if you will, to speak in editing terms. And the DeLorean is now on that Inner Geekdom championship, which you are probably looking at as we speak right now.
Yeah, I love it, and I was proud. I got there was a Back to the Future question in my championship match, because so you know I have a certain way of studying, and I watch all the movies. My rookie year, because I was like, I'm going to go all in for a year. And before every match, I came up with it was usually like 7 weeks where I would be able to watch every movie almost, or to a certain degree. But it was always my pleasure to get to Back to the Future. And I always kind of stretch it out. I have one Back to the Future 1 week, then the second one another week, you know, so it can kind of keep all fresh in my mind. But the question I got in the title match was, what is it written on the top of the DeLorean where they put the trash in? You know, you know that, right? Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Fusion. So that I was pretty. Yeah, I was trying to quiz you, but
you were asking me if I knew what Mr. Fusion was on the Back to the Future podcast.
But my opponent didn't know it, so that was pretty. I think he didn't get it, or maybe he did. No, I don't think he did. So
no, I don't think that he did.
That was pretty. it was pretty nice. And I always know that if you're in the crowd and I miss a Back to the Future question, I'm going to hear it from you, because I've seen when you're in the crowd and someone misses a James Bond one, you get pissed. So
I do. I get a little hot about it. I do get a little hot about it. And it's funny in the movie trivia Schmodown. Yeah, you got that question correct. I think I even got a name drop when that question was being asked by Christian or Mark.
Yeah.
And then though, last thing and then we're going to get to the casting of the movie. But one of the worst answers in the history of the movie trivia Schmodown at one point was one is held by you. Unfortunately, it was "Don't Tell Peter, Don't Tell Harry."
Yes.
And from Spider-Man. Y'all go find it on YouTube if you're interested. But one of the worst answers ever given in the history of the movie trivia Schmodown is by a hopeful future guest of this podcast, a guy named John Roca, who competes in the movie trivia Schmodown. He's also a movie critic out there in Los Angeles. He has his YouTube account. I think it's called Outlaw Nation. A very, very smart guy. Very knowledgeable guy. Multi-time champion in the movie trivia Schmodown. So anyway, you're thinking Back to the Future is just one of those movies that everybody, knows. And he was asked a question in the general trivia league, the singles league, not Intergeekdom, and he was asked what was Marty McFly's name that he went by in 1955. Right, and I think they even said it was like something was woven in there about underwear. It was like
I think it was what brand of underwear did he wear?
Right. It was like what brand of underwear did he go by in Back to the Future?
Giving him his name or whatever.
It was phrased like that. Everyone knows what we're talking about. Obviously, the answer is Calvin Klein. Well, sometimes I can understand under the heat of the lights, you get pressure. So John Roca couldn't immediately get it. So he went to multiple choice, which is an option in the game, and they say like, is it Hanes? Is it Calvin Klein? Is it is it Fruit of the Looms? Or is it Joe Boxer or whatever, right? And he's having to think about this, and he comes to the realization that the answer must be what this young 17-year-old man went by in Hill Valley in 1955. He said it's Fruit of the Loom. That's what he said that he went by. And it's the worst. You can
hear the crowd go H-crap.
Oh my goodness. There was a hush fell over the room. People are howling. They're like, what is going on? And he thought Marty McFly went by Fruit of the Loom and not Calvin Klein. It's up there. I go back and forth on if it's the worst answer or if yours is. But no offense, you're a champ now, so you can take it.
Hold on a second. I could take it. Yeah. I embrace it now. Sam Levine, right after I won the championship, I hung out with. We were in San Francisco, and we were at dinner at one point, and it got brought up, and he was like, "You can embrace it now." And it was the first time that I heard it, and it didn't sting. It stung every time until after I won the championship, and then it was like, because some people are like, it says Peter in the question. No, it doesn't. It just says, what does Goblin say to Spider-Man? But it came out of my mouth, and I thought I said it correctly. I knew what I was trying to say, but so I could totally relate. I mean, Fruit of the Loom, though, it's crazy. I don't know, man.
Fruit of the Loom's pretty bad. Fruit of the Loom's pretty bad. I might have to put that back at number one. Okay, now that we have all that out of the way, let's get to recasting Back to the Future. And what this is, again, this isn't a recast of the original movie. This is if they were to make Back to the Future again today in 2020, if they were to do a reboot, if they were to do a remake, and we're going to see a new cast of characters for Back to the Future, or a new cast of actors playing our favorite characters from Back to the Future, who would they be? So this started, once again, in that famous Uber ride.
Could you imagine, by the way, now with the de-aging technology, like how if they did cast for Doc, we're going to give out names of someone who is significantly older, and then when you go back 30 years, they would literally make this probably a famous actor, right? It would make him. It would be like what they did with Samuel L. Jackson in Captain Marvel. Like, can you imagine how good the de-aging technology is now? Where and hopefully not as bad as Irishman, but like it's distracting. But like where you could when you go back to 30 years. Really make these people look younger. Like that, it would be so crazy. Just an addition to if you were to reboot it,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm gonna do a podcast here in the next few weeks where we do like a rewatchables. I don't know if you ever heard the Bill Simmons podcast, the rewatchables, but they break movies down sometimes in categories, and one of them they do is picking nits. Where you nitpick the film. If I were to nitpick anything about the greatest movie ever made, Back to the Future, It would be
Yeah.
when Marty goes back to 55. Christopher Lloyd essentially looks the exact same. Doc is
Yeah, it's
essentially
just,
the
they try to
exact
change
same
his color.
in 30 years. Yeah, his hair's less gray. It's more of like a blondish kind of tone, turning gray, but it's still he looks the exact same.
Do they make a meta joke in Back to the Future too? I always thought it was meta, where like he peels off his face and he's like, "Hey, what do you think?" And he looks the same, and he's like, "You look great, Doc." But like, I always thought that was like a meta joke about how he didn't really look that different before or after that peeling of the skin,
I
and
think
it was
that
like a
you're right.
meta joke about the '85.
Yeah, I think that you're right, and
Oh, really?
it's actually one of the. Now I don't know this for a fact, but it's one of the, I've thought the same thing my entire life watching the movies, and I mean the joke is when he peels the face off, he looks the exact same. So I've always thought that,
Yeah.
oh yeah, so it doesn't matter what time period Doc is, he always looked like an older guy in his early 50s with gray hair, mid late 50s with
Yeah.
gray hair. So anyway,
Because now if he was in it, you would if you de-aged him, he would look exactly like he looked at Taxi. You know what I mean? So like,
Right.
but he would look he would currently look like he looks now if you just cast him as a part again, and then you would just de-age him and he would look like him from It would be so crazy, and it would really push that whole thing that look, you're dealing with the Doc Brown of the past. You know what I mean?
absolutely, and the thing is though with the de-aging, I wonder do they go the route of making the older actor look younger, or do they age up, right? And make
Yeah, well,
you know what I'm saying? Do the opposite.
Yeah,
way,
of course.
where you have the older actors. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. I'm getting
Yeah,
confused.
we'll find out here with we're gonna get the greatest cast put together here. So
Okay.
I got young and old, and then I do have a couple honorable mentions. I mean, I went all the way down the cast list as deep as Needles. So
Right.
I only
so
have one
you went
selection
further
for
than
Needles,
I did. So I actually only wanted to do the six main characters, which is
Gotcha.
Marty, Doc, George, Lorraine, Biff, Jennifer. I thought those were the ones.
Gotcha.
And I got to be honest with you, I had a lot of trouble with this. Some of them came
it's
easier.
tough.
Some were very difficult, Biff especially, and I'm interested to see who you have for Biff. But since you went down the cast list and outside of those six, I know you said you had people for you had mentions
Yeah.
for Strickland, for Needles, and maybe a couple others. So
Yeah.
let's hear those first. So this is once again Back to the Future,
Well, here's how crazy
taking place
I am.
in 2020.
All right. So first of all, the very bottom of the list, I had every rebooted movie, they always have a new band like sing a famous like. When Out of the Shadows came out for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they had like a punk band do the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles song. So it's blasphemy, but if you were to have another a band do Power of Love, I thought it would probably be they would either do something crazy like Eminem, and he would do like a rappy kind of version of Power of Love. But I was thinking more a studio would probably do something like Paramore, like a female band, or like Panic at the Disco, but it would be like a modern band doing a modern riff of Power of Love to like honor Huey Lewis in the new song. So those were that's how deep I went with my reboot.
That would be tough.
Yeah.
I think the hate
Lady
tweets,
Gaga, maybe?
The hate tweets just started sending your way. I think they just started
They're
right
gonna
now.
hate. Yeah, they're gonna
I
hate.
think
it.
maybe-
And
but-
how about
but-
rebooting the?
But I agree. I mean, that they
You go ahead.
would go that way if they're going to do Power of Love. I think that probably a female would sing it, maybe like a Billie Eilish. I know she's big right now. She just won all the Grammys.
Oh, yeah, I thought
she
of
did
her.
the Bond song. Maybe her. I don't know. I don't know who could do
Lady
Power of
Gaga.
Love. Lady Gaga would be in contention, but she's like a little too big. Like at the time, Huey Lewis was big. But
Yeah.
he wasn't like the biggest star. It wasn't Michael Jackson. So you'd have to find somebody on like
that's true.
a more even plateau. Just I don't know who they go for, but I'm interested to know what everyone out there listening right now. Tweet us at Brad Gilmore, and your
I
Twitter's
can't wait.
at
I
Kev
can't wait to
Smets,
hear
right?
everybody. Yeah, I can't wait to hear everybody's like responses. 'Cause, I mean, now I'm going now we go to look. I think if you redo it, you have to keep the DeLorean. But if the studio was like, nope, you got to go with another car. I even threw up some cars here. I don't. Miss Movies, Brianne Chandler informed me that the Volkswagen Beetle doesn't go past 80, so that would be a problem. So they would have to retrofit the Beetle. But I always thought like an old Beetle would be funny. And then, like a Pontiac Fiero, kind of has that same look. I think it was a Mustang. I can't wait to read your book, by the way, but I'm sure you're going to have this story in it. Or I did read somewhere that it was originally supposed to be a Mustang, and that was Zemeckis or Bob Gale was like, Doc Brown would not drive a freaking Mustang. It's got to be a DeLorean.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
maybe if you wanted to honor that, you could have meta. But I think we go with the DeLorean. So we limit. They hate tweets, so we keep the DeLorean, right? Okay. So I only have one choice for needles because you want like a musician. That should be the musician slot, right? So I just have this image of the car rolling up, and I'm thinking more of the car side by side at the end of Back to the Future 3. But I was thinking Ice Cube for needles. So I just think Ice Cube. Yeah, I know. But like, just imagine an Ice Cube in the future when he's trying to get him to do the slide deal. I don't know, but did you want a musician in that spot? Because Flea was in that spot, right?
Right. You want
so
a
like
musician.
if you were to off the top of your head, who's your musician cameo for needles?
Okay, so I'd want somebody kind of similar in age. Now, Flea was so great because he was such a ball of energy, and he sold that character like a real sleaze bag. Oh, man, who would I do off the top of my head? Okay, you know what? Because I just saw him in a Super Bowl commercial.
Okay.
Post Malone. Do you know Post Malone?
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
I think Post Malone could be Needles. Maybe.
There it is.
He looks dirty.
And that's not as
he
big,
looks a
too.
little grungy.
Yeah.
He looks like he might get into some mischief with all the face tattoos. Not my prime candidate, but off the top of my head, I go with Post Malone.
Or maybe we just, he's the C-3PO of the saga, and you recast and you get because you keep Flea, because it's hard to not imagine him.
De-age him. You know what I mean? You remember when they remade The Longest Yard and they still had Burt Reynolds in it? You know, I feel like that you still got to have Flea in it somewhere. So okay,
he's the connective tissue to all this.
He's the connective tissue. So far, you've said Lady Gaga will do Power of Love and Ice Cube.
No, they're gonna kill me. No, I mean my vote would be. Yeah, I'm gonna get destroyed. Okay. And then so Clara Clayton, I just have a couple of names. I mean, I think the easiest, because again, I'm trying to do it like if you were in the head of like the studio, right? Like Clara Clayton's got to be a little older. And so I was thinking, I mean, these are too easy in softball, and I think they're too big, but like you'd have Gwyneth Paltrow or Kate Blanchett. And then I was also thinking Halle Berry, because I thought Halle Berry was great in the way she was kind of like nerdy and sweet in Kingsman, The Golden Circle. So it would be that kind of Halle Berry, not like super sexy. You know what I mean? Those are my three for Clara Clayton.
Halle Berry and Gwyneth Paltrow in those roles. I really do. I think Gwyneth Paltrow is almost the modern day Mary Steenburgen. I mean, just kind of there's a similar vibe about her. But I like spicing it up a little bit with Halle Berry. And I think, of course, Mary Steenburgen was gorgeous in 1990. But for me, in 2020, if Halle Berry is Clara Clayton, you understand why Doc was going to risk getting shot in the back over a matter of $80. You know what I mean? Like, I'm with you. I'm with you on Halle all the way. I'm in. Okay, let's keep going.
That's great. Cool. So I haven't hopefully I didn't offend too many people on that, because like that was my choice. And also just because she's so good at like that quiet, like subdued, like again, it's just, you have to see her in like other movies because, she's awesome at Storm and stuff. But okay, anyways, we're moving on. So Linda McFly. So I have Linda and Dave. Well, first of all, Linda, I would have like Kat Denning, Mindy Kaling. I have Rebel Wilson's a little too on the nose and too easy, but she would be kind of funny. Anna Kendrick. But let me give you my Dave McFly. Okay, Kat Dennings. Okay, so we go Kat Dennings, and then alongside her. Oh man, some of these now I'm right. I'm like, well, maybe not. Well, I really for some reason thought Jason Bateman. I think Jason Bateman would be a good Dave McFly. I could imagine him wearing the Mickey Mouse hat or the Mickey Mouse shirt and putting his hand in the air and he's waving. And then I have this is a weird one. I don't know why I wrote this, but Dave Franco. But he's been like the brother of a lot of movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's definitely the brother role. I think Jason Bateman might be a little bit on the older side of the spectrum.
I guess it's like I can't cheat and be like, I had Luke Hemsworth there too. Not Liam, but not Chris, but Luke. But that's because I have another stunt casting later. But and then Shia LaBeouf. I don't know why I wrote him for Dave McFly. I don't know. So maybe Dave McFly. I need your help, dude. I don't know why I put Shia there. I don't know why I'm.
Well, the thing is Linda and Dave, they didn't do a whole lot right in the movies. In Back to the Future 2, there was actually a deleted scene that Dave McFly ran into Marty outside of the
drunk.
Casino. Right? Yeah, drunk. And,
yeah, he's all drunk. Yeah.
And so they didn't have a whole lot to do. I'm just trying to think of who could be that.
Maybe we
guy.
go unknowns with them.
I think unknowns.
Maybe we
Just
go
cast
unknowns with them.
Yeah, go straight unknowns.
Yeah, because
first time we're laying eyes on
give
them.
someone their break.
Give somebody give them the
All right,
rub, as we say in wrestling.
That was my weakest one. I'm going to redeem myself now as we get to the top here. My Mr. Strickland choices, I think you're really going to like.
All right.
Okay, so there's a couple ways you can go. You can go really like on the nose and do like Tommy Lee Jones or Jason Statham, where you can go the bald and just like I thought Terry Crews might be a funny one because he's so big. But my idea would be to gender swap it and do Leslie Jones.
Leslie Jones. Okay. I don't.
That's
mind
a gender
that
swap. That's a little crazy. Frank suggested Ken Jeong to me, which I think is that's
no.
So you'd have
no, Frank, get the hell out of
he'd
here.
Be a crazy.
Make
yeah.
like a tree.
And then the other one,
get the hell out of here.
Make like a tree, and then David Koechner from Anchorman. I think he would be more like a sleazy, not like. So here's where it's like it gets meddlesome because it's like, well, if you want to go on the nose with how his character was, you do want someone like Tommy Lee Jones or Terry Crews or Jason Statham. But if you want to go where he's a little more sleazy of a type of guy, you have David Koechner, obviously from Anchorman and The Office, Packard. You know what I mean? And then and I don't know why Leslie Jones like popped out to me. I'm like, if we wanted to like swap genders, because I have another crazy gender swap later too. But that was my idea. Any ideas on your end?
I have one. I have two. First, when I think of aesthetic, old, baldish man who could be a little stern, I think Ed Harris. But I think this might be a little bit too,
great.
Not bad, right? I mean, we could see Ed Harris maybe being in that role. Here's one for you I want to float out. Sam Rockwell.
Ooh, I like that.
Sam Rockwell, kind of like how he played Justin Hammer in Iron Man 2.
Yep.
Kind of the same kind of vibe that he has going on. So I could see him maybe kind of being more condescending than even Strickland was. But I feel like you do have to go with like kind of the gruff, kind of somewhat Southern, even though Strickland wasn't Southern, but he had some sort of just stern drawl to him. And so Ed Harris is the first one that pops in my mind.
Yeah, I really like your Ed Harris choice. I think that it would be between me, like I would say Ed Harris or Tommy Lee Jones then, but I think I'm gonna go with yours again. So you keep. I like Ed Harris. I would say I cast Ed Harris. And here's the thing, because you have to decide like, do you want to go pure copies of their characters, or do you want to let them have a little twist? You know what I mean? I love James Tolkien. Like, there's no better Strickland. And so when I say Leslie Jones, I'm not just trying to do it because I want to gender swap everybody and make a splash, but I'm trying to get in the head of what a studio would do. And we know studio, they did that with the Ghostbusters movies, and she was in that movie actually. But I just thought of like, if you were to, that would be an interesting challenge too. Is from the top bottom, you have to gender swap everybody. You know what I mean? What kind of Back to the Future movie do you have?
Yeah, that would be a little bit more difficult. But I understand.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing. I'm like, you don't want to go too on the nose with some of the castings because you don't want people to be comparing them. You don't want a Solo situation, Han Solo.
Yeah.
Where everyone's constantly comparing a 1-to-1, like, Harrison wouldn't do that, or what have you. So I get
agreed.
that.
You want the spirit of the character, yeah.
Right, and I did. I have a couple left field choices coming up, but I understand the gender swap. So you're not alone, but I think so far Ed Harris is what we might.
Yeah, I'm gonna back you on Ed Harris. I'm gonna say Ed Harris because
we've cast Ed Harris.
He's cast. He makes up for my Dave McFly, Shia LaBeouf. So Ed Harris. We got two. So we have. Halle Berry. We have Flea as Needles, He Range. We have Halle Berry for Claire Clayton. And then Linda and Dave, we're going to give someone their big break. They're unknowns. Mm-hmm. And then we have Ed Harris for Mr. Strickland. So now we get into the tops here.
Okay, one more. Can I throw out one more thing? Mayor Goldie Wilson in just a cameo.
Okay.
Just a cameo. One scene is all I need. Kevin Hart.
Oh, yeah.
Similar to
that would
how
be
he
great.
did
Just
in
him
Fast
on the
and Furious. Uh-huh.
Yeah, just on the campaign trail or something. Because again, we're not necessarily rebooting the story beat for beat, but if you just know that they're out there in that universe,
right?
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, I love it.
Quick illusion. It's Kevin Hart. Okay, so now we're in the top 6. So now this is where people are going to really start looking at us. Now, I thought about this in a variety of ways. And first thing I thought about when you're crafting this story and you're crafting this cast and you have to tell it to a new generation, you want to bring life to that story. You want to bring a sense of a freshness to it, almost a modern. If you're going to go modern, and you want to update the effects, you want somebody who knows how to work within that field, right? Where you have CG,
Yeah.
you know when to use CG, when to use practical, how to make the audience feel something about these characters with that use of computer generated images. So I don't know if you thought about it, but for director of Back to the Future, Back to the Future 2020, the director, Jon Favreau.
Jon Favreau. I was going to think Taika Waititi too, if you wanted to.
Taika
for the
Waititi would
humor.
be great. Taika Waititi would be great.
Yeah.
Jon Favreau would be great. They're both guys who come from they know how to act on screen, so they know what the actors need. They have that comedic flair to them. I just think that with Jon Favreau, what he did with Mandalorian, what he did with the first Iron Man, Jungle Book, visually, The Lion King is stunning. Just from what they're able to create with computers, how realistic those animals looked. Whether I still prefer the animated version, but I think that Jon Favreau could help craft the story. I think Taika Waititi's a good job too. Okay, now
I think I choose Favreau, and I agree. So I think Favreau's our director. And do you think now we should start with the top so we know who's around our main two? Like, are we trying to? Should we populate the universe? Let's just get the tops out of the way, so then we see who's working with them. Probably. I love your Favreau pick. Like that. If it wasn't for me, that Favreau is fantastic.
Favreau,
so he's our director.
Okay, so we got a director. All right. I guess we start with Marty. So
I don't have many picks for Marty because I'm all in on one, but I have a couple others. But we'll see what you say.
I have two. And I actually spoke to my girlfriend right before we did this, and I said, hey, who would you cast as Marty? And she said a name that I already had on here. So, and I think you have it too. It's the name that kind of gets floated out a lot. But if I were to cast Marty McFly in Back to the Future 2020, Tom Holland is my number one choice.
That's my number one pick too. So, yeah, if he signs the contract, we're signing him. We're getting him a 3-picture deal with Favreau and everybody else. Tom Holland for sure. But now we can say who other people we thought of, and without fear of getting reprisal, because I do have a couple.
Okay, go.
But I
go
love
first.
the Tom Holland pick.
You go first. Tom Holland, I think, and I think, by the way, just first he can play younger. He already's done the high school, thing, and with Spider-Man, and I think that he knows how to hit the comedy. He's so good in those Spider-Man movies on hitting the comedy, even within all of the action, even within these great situations that he finds himself in, he can still hit the comedy, and that was what was great about Michael J. Fox. It was Michael J. Fox, even in this intense situation that he finds himself in, of sitting in a vehicle, trying to kind of kiss his mom, but not kiss his mom, and feel her up a little bit. So you know what I mean? Like, his comedy sensibilities in that moment is what made it not creepy. I think Tom Holland could pull that off. But who are your options, B and C, or what have you?
And this is just how much I love the movie too. Just reminding myself of like how she's like, I would never do that with a boy, and then an hour and a half later she's doing it. It's just, the movie's perfect.
Jesus,
the other ideas that I had.
Huh?
Yeah, doesn't she say something like that? Yeah, all of it, and then she's doing it. Yeah. I was thinking, look, Tom Holland's my number one, and so the rest of it is just because I wanted to flesh out a couple, I thought of Ezra Miller because I think his comedic timing, Justice League got panned and stuff, but he was actually, really good in his part of being awkward and everything around him. Like, just his idea of like when he was running around the bat cave and everything was fresh and new, or like when he was like, oh, there's your bat cave. Oh, sorry. And I think that kind of comedic, awkward kid, I think he could play younger. And then I had, then breaking the rules a little bit, like Simon Pegg when he was really young. If we decided to do this all overseas, Simon Pegg would have been a good one back in the day. You know what I mean?
Arlington Square.
Arlington Square.
Okay. I like where you're going. Ezra Miller is actually a really good choice. I thought that he was one of the shining spots in Justice League. And I've seen him in a couple other things, and he's got a young look still. So that's what I was trying to think of. I was like, okay, I can think of some great people who could be Marty McFly, but they're all in their mid to late 30s. And I was like, man, who
Yeah, I
could be
know.
Marty McFly except for Tom
Kevin
Holland?
Hart would have been great as a young kid. Kevin Hart too. Just
Yeah.
could you imagine fucking Kevin Hart running around just freaking out?
Although
Like,
now I'm imagining a Back to the Future movie with Kevin Hart as Marty McFly and The Rock as Biff Tannen, and I don't know how I feel about it anymore.
yeah.
Or John Cena's Biff Tannen. John
Yeah.
Cena actually would have been
I didn't think about him.
would be a great Biff Tannen if you were able to cast somebody in their mid-40s to be Biff Tannen. If you were
Yeah.
to cast the older Biff, John Cena actually he can pull off great comedy.
But
Obviously,
if you're doing the if you're doing de-aging, remember for the parents, you can cast old and de-age him. I think it would only be for Marty that he needs to stay the same age. Well, he does stay the same. Well, that's in Back to the Future too. But I think with the parents, you could get away with, because I think some of my Biffs might be a little old here.
Yeah, so I'm actually gonna.
What's your other pick?
So my
for
other
Marty?
pick for Marty, it's not going to be a name that you know automatically. But again, I was trying to think of, okay, who's somebody who's around the age, has that comedic timing, is used to working in big movies, even though he hasn't had a major part. And there was a kid who's I've seen over the last years. He's been in MCU movies. He's been in Jurassic World movies. I really like him.
Gotcha.
His name is Ty Simpkins. He
Ty
plays
Simpkins.
he plays the kid that Robert Downey Jr. finds in the Tennessee town in Iron Man 3. Real good comedy. He was real young in that movie. He's now 19 years old. He's got a Marty McFly look to him when you look him up. He's got the comedy. He's a little unknown, so maybe people aren't like so put off by the casting. Like, oh my God, I can't believe so-and-so's playing Marty McFly. I was thinking of it kind of from the Aladdin perspective of we needed somebody who's somewhat unknown but still looks the part and people won't automatically judge. So that's why he was my backup, Ty Simpkins.
That's good, and I like that because you're right. It's a safe choice because no matter who, you don't want to be stunt casting either. You know what I mean? So I would back that as the backup. He's the understudy to Tom Holland.
He's the understudy.
I had a random one too because this is the first name when I was at first thinking like, are we doing Parliament Square? So I was trying to find British, and I had Simon Bird. I don't know if you ever watched The In-Betweeners, but Simon Bird he's really kind of dorky. It would be, you'd have to go Marty McFly was way bigger of a dork, so I don't think that would go just looking at it. But yeah, I think Tom Holland, Ezra Miller, and you're right, Ty Simpkins is good. I think that and he also, if we're looking at it as like he's had the weight of being in a big movie before, so it won't be new to him,
Right, that's what I was thinking. Like he's kind of experienced in the way he can play off experienced actors. I liked him in it. Okay, let's move then to Doc. So if we've got Tom Holland, I think this is probably the biggest debate here of who to get. I've thought about this.
Now, do you remember who we decided in the Uber ride of Destiny? Do you remember who we picked?
I think that I do because I think that the three people that we discussed at least at the time, I think are all three on my list because I like them all.
Okay.
But now when Doc was being originally cast back in 1985, there's a great book that I'm not looking at it in my hands, but I see it on my shelf. It's called Back to the Future: The Ultimate Visual History. If you don't have this book, Kevin, you got to get it. It's phenomenal. What's
it called?
It's called the Back to the Future: The Ultimate Visual History, and it's essentially a textbook on Back to the Future. I referenced it several times when writing my book Back from the Future, and they had an original cast list of some of the people who were brought in to read for different roles, and one of the guys that were brought in for Doc was someone who at the time I would think is rather young, but now is in a great position to play the role, and that is Jeff Goldblum. I think Jeff Goldblum, he's already great in the hair now. He has that quirkiness to him. And here's the great thing about Christopher Lloyd. And aside from Back to the Future, I've always loved Christopher Lloyd in everything that he's been in. Whether he's Uncle Fester, whether he's the Page Master, whether he's Professor Plum, whether he's on Taxi, I've always loved Christopher Lloyd. And the great thing about him was he was able to say and deliver this complicated, convoluted dialogue at this rapid, heartbeat pace, right?
Yeah.
And
Good call, yeah.
and it was always great and comedic, and that is something that Jeff Goldblum naturally, the way he speaks and enunciates and his eloquency is already such that I think that the dialogue and the delivery of it wouldn't be super difficult for him. Now, my only reservation about Jeff Goldblum is being able to over emote the way that Christopher Lloyd did. Christopher Lloyd described his
Without
version
feeling
of Doc.
bad, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Christopher Lloyd described his version of Doc as constantly in crisis, and so I think that Jeff Goldblum could deliver a lot of the dialogue. He could hit the jokes. I'm a little iffy on if he can overdo it to the point that Christopher Lloyd did, and Christopher Lloyd overacted in the best possible way, right? Where he was just projecting, almost like a theater actor.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like when Jeff Goldblum was in Independence Day when things were going wrong. Like, you know, I'm trying to think of him. Well, yeah, because like he always just kind of seems like he's in control. You know what I mean? Like even like in Jurassic The Lost World, when they're all shouting Sarah, Sarah, and Vince Vaughn says Sarah Harding, and then all of a sudden Jeff Goldblum's like, how many Sarahs do you think are on this island? Like they're in crisis looking for his girlfriend, but he's still quipping, you know?
Right.
So it would be a different, you know, again though, we don't necessarily want an exact replica. You just kind of want the spirit of Doc. But yeah, I think that's a great pick. Jeff Goldblum is he's my number one on there too, but that was from our conversation. Yeah,
so who are your twos and threes? Do you have any twos and threes? I got two more on my list.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have a crazy idea. I mean, this would be two stunts, and I think everybody would hate him. And I think it's a little too late, but with de-aging. But you could do, and it just depends on how he's going to be in the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. But you could do Jim Carrey. Like I think Jim Carrey might be able to do it because he would be over the top. But you just wouldn't want him to be too Jim Carrey-y where he looks like he's being like, I don't want Doc Brown being Ace Ventura, but like if he could bring something new to it, I think it's like 10 years too late now because I think he might be a little off the reservation now, but maybe that would help him out. I had Jim Carrey and then I had Jack Black if you wanted to go that route.
You know what?
Again, I'm just thinking Maniac.
I don't mind either one of those, to be quite frank. I don't mind either one of those. Jim Carrey, I think, could pull it off. I actually saw my brother years ago sent me this fake Back to the Future poster for Back to the Future, a Netflix original, and they had Jim Carrey cast as Doc in that poster.
Love that.
And I can't remember who the kid was. I think he was a kid from Stranger Things, perhaps. Yeah. So Jim Carrey, I could see. Jack.
Oh, you're gonna have to send me that.
I will. I'll find it and send it to you. Jack Black. He'd be like lower on the list, but I wouldn't mind him. Jeff Goldblum, I like. Here are my other two. And I think I floated both of these to you, but in that car ride. But just if you're going with Tom Holland, even though we've already seen,
I know who you're gonna
the
go.
dynamic. Again, the dynamic between the two actors would be great. Also, you need somebody who can deliver quick lines, a lot of dialogue, sound like he knows what he's talking about, be able to over-emote, be able to overdo it at times when needed. Robert Downey Jr. would be a really great Doc Brown. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, we just saw that movie with Iron Man.
Dr. Little, yeah, that's what I was saying.
But,
well, I was going to say also, did Doolittle do well? Because if you're thinking, if we're trying to be realistic, would the studio be like, well, he just played a Dr. Doolittle?
Yeah, but it didn't do well. But I don't know. I mean, but here's the thing. This is an established.
I don't hate it.
Franchise, right? It's established brand name. Doolittle is, but he had some weird Australian take on the character that I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
He's had some weird version that I don't think was the classic Doolittle. But it is interesting that you bring up Dr. Doolittle because my left field choice, once again,
yeah, I like this one too.
Over-emoting, knows how to hit the comedy. It would be a bit different, but this man has played a professor before and a doctor.
Yes.
Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy. Now listen, they wrote the. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm waiting for you. I was just gonna say Star Trek 4: The Voyage Home. Do you remember that movie where they go back for the whales? Were you a big Star Trek guy?
They go back. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they go back to the 80s, and the Catherine Hicks plays Gillian Taylor, and it's this whale, scientist girl that works at the institute. originally it was written for Eddie Murphy, who was self-proclaimed a big Star Trek fan, and just for whatever reason it didn't work out. But I could like he's in that geek. He likes geek culture stuff, so I think that he would be really good because you're right. He would over emote. He would bring a different style to it as well. And so I could really see that pick. I actually think that that's a great pick.
And here's my other thing is I thought about him for a variety of reasons, but one of them was when I saw Aladdin last year, and they had to cast an impossible role in trying to find somebody to play the genie and to pick up where Robin Williams left off, and one of the great performances of all time, animated or not. That Robin Williams genie is just spot on. And the way that they went with it to change it a little bit and go with Will Smith, you have a different vibe to him, and not only do you switch it up for diversity reasons, and he's got a different cultural background now, but just the flavor that Will Smith brought the character felt familiar, but was new and different, and was his own.
Yeah,
and that's why I thought, man, Eddie Murphy, as long as he doesn't go like Pluto Nash cheeseball, and he plays it more with having the serious dramatic moments, which are in Back to the Future that he had even in Dolomite Is My Name. I think that he could play that aged inventor who blew through his family.
And think about the de-aging too. Think about the not stunt casting, but think about when he's de-aged and now all of a sudden he looks like when he recorded his comedy specials as a young man.
He looks
but he's a young man that. Yeah, he'll look like Axel Foley, but he's like worried with all the blueprints and like trying to be this inventor. I like that a lot. I have an outside the realm pick here too. I had Adam Driver. Think of a crazed Adam Driver with the hair and sweating and running around. That was given to me actually by Brandon Hanna, and I had to throw it on you.
It's not bad.
Adam Driver.
Now I think that Brandon Hanna, who's a movie trivia Schmodown competitor, I think that he actually doesn't like Back to the Future. So I don't know if I can.
Well, then screw him. Then Adam Driver's out.
Yeah,
Forget
Adam Driver's out. But I don't mind it, especially if you age him up and then back down. He could be something.
Yeah.
But so who are we casting?
And then the easy stupid pick. I had Will Ferrell and I had Will Ferrell and Bill Murray. Like Bill Murray would be a different take on it, and that would be like in the '80s. So I honestly, you sold me. We keep going with your picks, but that's good. I want to make the best movie possible. I say we do Eddie Murphy, and I think also just because I think he was so famous as a young man too that the de-aging people would go there just to see, like, you know what I mean? Like I think that the de-aging and how good that aspect of the movie would be with just and his same acting, but like him. I don't know. I think that Eddie Murphy would be great, and I think the timing's great too with his renewed popularity. So as a studio exec, I want to go with your pick, Eddie Murphy, if you do.
Okay. I think we can go Eddie Murphy. I'm between Eddie Murphy and Robert. We'll offer the part to both of them. We'll see which one bites, but I could go either way. I understand if people don't want to go.
We'll play them
RDJ.
against each other.
Yeah. I can understand if people don't want to go RDJ because we feel like we've already seen that film. So we can go for Eddie for now. Okay. This is before we get to I want to save Biff for last because that's the hardest one for me.
Yeah, he's the hardest one. So he's got to be tough and he's got to be funny too.
So let's go to Lorraine.
Okay.
Lorraine's another hard one. Now, I came up with two people for this one, and I like them both a lot. I'm leaning toward one more than the other. But so for Lorraine, you got to think about somebody who can have the acting chops to play that depth that's needed as old Lorraine. Because old Lorraine is sad. Yeah. She doesn't like where her life is. She's an alcoholic. And Leah Thompson nailed it, right? She nailed it. So you want someone who can have the acting chops to pull off that depth, but then when they're in the 50s, can play that innocence and a little bit of that, oh my God, he's such a dream, right, mentality. So you need someone who's also beautiful. And you could see Marty, because here's the thing, and I don't remember exactly who said it, but I remember watching the Back to the Future behind-the-scenes commentaries on one of the DVDs, and I think it was Bob Gale who said, at the same time, even though it's weird that Marty's mom is hitting on him, he's also like a little bit flattered because it's like, oh, wow, like my mom was gorgeous back in the day, and she's kind of, I'm the object of her desire at the time. Even though it's a weird Oedipal kind of thing, still he was a little bit flattered by it. So you got to have somebody who's gorgeous in a sense. So There's two names that are on my list for Lorraine. The first one, again, I'm a studio. I'm thinking about recency. I'm thinking about hits. I'm thinking about money. I'm thinking about box office. But I'm also thinking about getting a name that people might have heard before but is still on the precipice of greatness. For Lorraine McFly, I'm going with Florence Pugh.
Ooh, interesting.
That's my number one choice, Florence Pugh. You might know her. She played Paige in the Fighting with My Family movie. She's going to be in the upcoming Black Widow. She just got nominated for an Academy Award for Little Women.
Dude, I love that. Dude, that's so. You know what? And she's not like overly big yet, dude. I think you're going to win me over on this one too because not for nothing. I recently finally saw Fighting with My Family, and I remember looking her up like, who is she? This girl's gorgeous, and she's great acting. Like, she could do the sad and the triumph and everything like that. And I looked her up, and then I was stoked to see that she was in the new Black Widow movie. And I like it because it's relevant right now, and she's about to blow up even bigger. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, she's really about to take off. So I was going to go Florence Pugh. My backup choice, Haley Steinfeld.
I had Haley Steinfeld on my list. I had her with potentially. I have her potentially as Jennifer Parker too. Haley Steinfeld.
I have her as Jennifer Parker as well written down. I said her. She could be Lorraine or Jennifer.
Yeah. So that might be. Yeah, my Lorraine are not as creative. The only one that I got a little creative, but it's tricky because she's the parent of Marty. So then you'd have to kind of cast to make her look. Zoe Saldana, I think, would be good, but like she doesn't look like our Marty. You know what I mean?
Right. There might be some issues.
And then I went like really lazy. I was not happy with my Lorraine because I'm really happy with. I was really happy with my other one. But Brie Larson I had, but then it starts becoming an MCU movie. But I think you're. This is why you're the writer of that book, dude. You know better than anyone. Like, I think you got to go Florence.
I think Florence might be the one. I appreciate the compliment. I don't know if I'm a Hollywood casting director yet, but I think that Florence makes sense in the role because also
we could afford her right now. She's not too big.
Mm-hmm.
We could afford her. We could afford her because we're gonna have to pay. We're gonna have to pay up for my idea for Biff maybe.
Okay. So okay. Let's cast Florence. Let's go to Jennifer then.
Tom Cruise for Biff. I'm just kidding.
Let's go to Jennifer. So Haley Steinfeld, we both had as a potential. I had her as my backup Lorraine, or one of my choices as Jennifer. Here are my other ones. I don't know why, and I hadn't seen it since it came out in theaters, but she's been in my head, and she was in Aladdin as well. Naomi Scott. Naomi Scott played Princess Jasmine. She also played Kimberly in the Power Rangers movie. Very beautiful woman. And I think that even though, and she was in the new Charlie's Angels, Jennifer Parker isn't the biggest role. And in the first movie, Claudia Wells, who I've had on this podcast, and by the way, in 1985, I don't think that there was anyone more gorgeous than Claudia Wells.
Gorgeous.
Oh my gosh, man. I remember
to hear why she couldn't do the sequel, right? Or wait, what's the story where she was cast and then?
Well, she was originally cast. She was originally cast with Eric Stoltz, and then when Eric got replaced, she had shot a pilot, I believe, called Off the Rack for ABC that wasn't going to get picked up, and then it did get picked up. So when they recast, something like that. But anyway, she got picked up by the pilot got picked up. She had to go do it, so she had to drop out of the film. And then when they went to recast Eric Stoltz, they got Michael J. Fox. The actress that they did cast to play Jennifer was too tall, so they went back to Claudia Wells.
That's right. Okay, that was it. Yeah, I love these stories. These are great.
But she was so breathtaking in the first movie. Not the biggest role, right? I mean, she's only in a few scenes, but a memorable role. And Jennifer Parker was, again, like the object of every young man's desire when watching Back to the Future. I remember when Claudia Wells, she told me one time that she thought I was handsome. Oh, brother. Come on, man. I felt like I was on top of the world.
Oh, man.
I felt like I was on top of the world. So, okay,
That's
who do you
great.
have?
She should have written down her phone number with "I love you" above it on the back of the clock tower flyer.
Yeah,
that would be amazing.
So who do you have for Jennifer
I'd freak
Parker?
out.
Who do you have aside from Haley Steinfeld?
I had Shailene Woodley. I had Zoe Kravitz, but I think she might be too old now. This might be a little too on like Mary Elizabeth Winstead, but that means she's not like I don't think like she's pretty, but like she's not like that drop dead gorgeous. And then but I was going more like Shailene Woodley or Zoe Kravitz. Those are my two number ones right there.
Okay.
But I like but our choice that we couldn't cast her. Look, she was in the casting studio. We really loved her for Lorraine, but we have to go with Florence for Lorraine. So I think we should go with your other pick for Lorraine and give her Jennifer Parker to her.
Okay, so Haley Steinfeld, we're gonna give it to Jennifer Parker.
Yeah, what do you think?
I like that.
Or do you want to go?
I only had one other one. I had Haley Steinfeld, I had Naomi Scott, and switch it up a little bit. Bring in a little bit more diverse cast. They're in that same Power Rangers. Did you see that Power Rangers movie?
No, I did not.
No. Okay.
But I'll look up the name right now. It's fine.
So there's Naomi Scott, who I really like, and then also there was the girl who played the Yellow Ranger. She's a singer. She's been in a few movies. None of them have been particularly successful, but she is age appropriate and she's very attractive. Her name is Becky G. Becky G. She's a Spanish artist, and I think that she would be. I think she'd be good. She'd be good. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan, so maybe I'm casting a little bit from my personal preferences. But Becky G, Naomi Scott.
Upon first glance at her photos, I think we should definitely cast Becky G. So she's very pretty. We should probably make sure she knows how to act. But if you're saying that she acts,
she's been in movies.
Yeah, I do like the diversity of it as well. So, because I just feel like my Jennifer Parkers are all too old that I picked, to be honest.
They're a little aged up, especially if we're going to go with Tom Holland. I would say.
Yeah, it's kind of like we need someone Zendaya's age.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking Zendaya. So Becky G, Naomi Scott, Haley Steinfeld. I could go with any one of them, to be honest with you. I'm happy with them all. So we'll leave that.
Let's send them out offers and find out. Yeah, we'll see. We'll let the agents fight over that one.
We'll let the agents fight over. Okay. So
we can't crap out. We got to pick one. We got to decide one. The people will get mad.
Okay,
what do you think?
I'm gonna go Naomi Scott.
Okay.
Check her out.
Let's go Naomi Scott. I'm okay with that.
You're okay with that? Okay. We're gonna move on.
No, I'm familiar with her. She was good. Yeah. Okay.
She was good as Princess Jasmine. She's a very pretty girl. She's a great.
And again, we don't want all. Again, I think if I were to do this again, I was going too big name for every part, and that's just not realistic. I'm trying to be realistic here. Otherwise, the budget would be $450. It'd be bigger than the Endgame budget. So.
Yeah. That's what it sounds like. We're casting Endgame for a little bit. Okay. Last two. These were the hardest ones for me. They were all hard, but these were the hardest ones.
George McFly is hard, dude.
George is very difficult. So I was thinking somebody who has the chops again to pull off old young, to also be a little nerdy, to be a little off-putting at times. I went with, and he's a big name, so that's the only reason I could think of him. I went with Timothy Chalamet.
Okay.
That's my only choice I have. I couldn't think of anybody else. But Timothy Chalamet, I know he's got the chops. He's got a similar build to Crispin Glover, very thin, rail thin. I don't know if he could pull off the comedy, but that was the only guy I could come up with. Yeah,
because he's pretty. He has he has that deep, like that. Yeah, he has that dark eyes. Like, I mean, if you wanted to go real dark, yeah, because you need to have someone who's really like comedic.
Right. That was why. That's why I was having trouble. I was just having trouble.
Like, you don't want DJ Qualls. Like, we don't want DJ Qualls. That's too nerdy. That's too on the nose. No, I mean, I don't hate it. Yeah, because you want that. You're casting for that tall, skinny too, which I didn't. I mean, I had Christopher Mintz-Plasse as one of them, but like that's too nerdy, right? Like, I don't think George McFly. I think George ends up being this awesome stud in the '80s with the new timeline, right? So,
right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Who do
I'm trying
you
to
have?
think. So that was the only name you had?
That's the only one I had.
I had Paul. This is my hardest one, so I was really counting on you. If Steve Carell. Well, you could de-age him. Steve Carell with the 40-year-old virgin was kind of awkward. He would play different kind of awkward, but I think that might be two big names. Like, I do think I like your choice, See, you're doing it where you cast him young and then age him up. Where I was
Right.
looking at like we de-age him, right? Yeah, I don't even want to say this other one because I don't know why I wrote it down because I have a question mark next to it. I was like Paul Rudd, maybe, but
Right. These last two have been really hard. So we're gonna put a question mark on George because I really just don't know. Maybe we go unknown.
yeah,
Maybe we
he's
go
so
unknown.
hard. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm gonna type in real quick now that we're going for I'm gonna type in on Google. I'm sure they have it. Tall, skinny actors. Let's see if there's. Who do we got here? And now it's giving me Rick Fox, but he's not skinny. They're just only giving me super tall actors. So
Yeah, Rick
yeah,
Fox wouldn't be my optimal one. What about DJ Qualls?
Well, that's what I was saying. Like that DJ Qualls is like you remember that guy, right? From
Yeah.
I forget what movies that.
He's in a lot of
Yeah.
movies.
Or how about we do right by him and we cast Crispin Glover?
You know what?
Stunt casting.
Stunt casting.
Stunt casting.
Crispin Glover reprises his role. He plays his age-appropriate George McFly, and then we de-age him. I think that's the only one that we can do because he
or Jay Barash.
Oh,
yeah, I was just looking at.
Yeah. I could see him. I think Crispin had it right. I mean, the thing about Crispin Glover, and when I got to talk to him for the podcast, we didn't get to talk much about Back to the Future. I mean, we did, but not a whole lot. I didn't have a whole lot of time with him. I only had like 15 minutes with him. But one of the things that he did so well was he accompanied his line delivery with these physical movements, right? And the way that he would just move his body is just, it added this whole depth and this layer to the character that was just, I mean, I really don't think that anybody could play him like that. And here's the thing. As great as Marty McFly, Michael J. Fox was, as great as Crispin was, Claudia Wells, and then Elizabeth Shue, Leah Thompson, Crispin Glover, and Jeffrey Weissman, the man or the person who was the best part of every movie. And in my opinion, I have a whole chapter about him in Back from the Future coming up. Biff Tannen, I think, was such a great villain. I think he's one of the best movie villains of all time. I put him in the top 5, up there with Darth Vader. He might be in the top 3. He might be top 2, and he's not 2. But Biff Tannen was such a great villain, and Tom Wilson played seven different variations of Biff, and that includes Griff and Mad Dog Tannen. And he was so versatile, but he was a physical presence who played a great bully. So I had such a hard time with this one. So I'm going to go to you first. Who did you have for Biff Tannen?
Well, if you remember, wow, it's just when you build it up. Our Uber drive, we came up with a dark horse, like a crazy out of the blue idea with John Boyega.
That's what
he can actually play funny.
He can play funny.
You have John Boyega, yeah.
I have John Boyega as Biff. He can play funny. He's big. Like, he's jacked. I mean, when you see John Boyega, he's got some size to him. Especially next to Tom Holland. I think he'd look physically dominating in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So he was one of the ones I had. Now, I had another one that I think that just is... I don't like it as much because I don't think he could play the comedy. But again, I'm thinking about let's bring some more diverse cast into it, and if we're gonna go John Boyega, I'm thinking, okay, if John turns us down, what about Michael B. Jordan? But I just don't think that he has the
I don't think he'd be as funny. He's not funny enough. Like, honestly, like if we were gonna go another MCU name, but Chris Hemsworth. Remember how funny he was in that horrible movie Vacation? But he was funny in it.
Yeah,
like
he was also the funniest part of. He was the funniest part of the Ghostbusters movie.
Yeah, that's right, Ghostbusters. I forget about that.
He was real good in that.
So
he's big.
You could do Chris Hemsworth, and he can get buff, and that he would probably play him dumber. He would bring his own twist to it too. So like, because he brought a new twist. We never thought of Thor as funny, or at least I didn't. When I first thought they were going to cast Thor, I always remembered the construction worker in Adventures in Babysitting, and then I always thought that Triple H would have been Thor, and it was just going to be this, more like if they would have shot it in the 80s and it was like Masters of the Universe. But like he brought Thor and made Thor like funny. You know what I mean? Which I never thought of. So, imagine his comedic chops making Biff just, but probably bringing it a fresh, unique way. I think Chris Hemsworth would be good. And then the other crazy one I had, but he'd have to start old and then de-age him would be, and you'd have to play him a little differently, but Danny McBride.
Oh, okay. That's definitely an off the wall. That's an off the wall.
Yeah, that was my off the wall.
I don't love it. To be honest, I don't love Danny McBride because I don't feel like physically he feels like a threat to me. Now he
would be like the out of shape bully, not like the buff like football player bully. He'd be like the guy that didn't. He'd like the guy that failed high school, so he's still in high school at Arlington Square.
Right.
At Arlington High.
At Arlington High. Now we said his name earlier, but John Cena would be a great 85 Biff. 55, you'd have to de-age him, and I don't want to get into too much of the de-aging, so that's why I'm going to go John Boyega as Biff, Tanner.
Yeah, I really like the John Boyega. Like that, he's my number one pick as well, and that's good that we could agree on the John Boyega because I think that would bring, and he's funny. Like he can do that comedic. Because isn't it funny? Like everybody I was trying to cast, I was trying to find like who's also funny. Like it's like that's why the original cast is so good. Is like they're not all comedians per se, but they all were fucking funny. Excuse my language. Right. They were all so funny.
They were all great. They were all funny. They knew the timing, but they knew the drama. They knew when to play the moment seriously. And I think that's why, when you read about and you learn about Eric Stoltz's casting, it just, it didn't work out because he wasn't funny. He didn't hit the jokes the right way. He was playing it more like, at least from all accounts, and I'm hoping with this 35th anniversary coming up, we'll see more of the Eric Stoltz footage because I know it all exists. But
do you think they would?
Well, Bob Gale has alluded to it. Like, hey, maybe one day we'll release it all. Maybe one day you'll see it. And he said that back in 2015. We're coming up on 2020 35th anniversary in July. I think it's possible.
I always heard that they said if you wanted to know how he played Marty, you watch Some Kind of Wonderful, and that was like what Marty was.
Right.
Did you hear that or no?
Yeah, I've heard that. And the thing is by all accounts, he was a great actor. But he played the moments like you would actually play them in real life. Like, what the hell is going on right now? I'm in the 50s. Yeah. I'm seeing my parents. My mom's into me. I don't know how to get back. This is crazy. And that's kind of who's playing it, like, really freaked out. And not so much freaked out, but still, I don't know. Michael J. Fox, once again, just perfect casting. You couldn't think of a better Marty McFly. It's just so perfect. So right now, in Back to the Future 2020, we have playing Marty McFly, Tom Holland, playing Doc, Eddie Murphy, playing Lorraine Florence Pugh, playing Biff, John Boyega, playing Jennifer Parker, Miss Naomi Scott, and playing George, we don't know, right?
I mean, you could do Eddie Redmayne if you were forced to pick someone else, but I feel like in the stunt casting that we do right by Crispin Glover, and he remained. No, you can't do that though. No, we can't. We have to make a decision, dude. We have to. We owe it to the fans.
It's just such a difficult one. It really is. It's hard, man, to think of somebody who could. Now, Biff.
Stephen Merchant, young Stephen Merchant.
Yeah, but then again, we're de-aging people. It's hard. That was the one where I literally, when we were going to do this, I looked through lists and lists of actors.
Me too.
I couldn't figure out anybody who could embody George McFly. And I just can't think of anyone. I can't think of somebody.
You could do the guy from Big Bang Theory, maybe, like gun to our head. Like,
no.
He's calling.
I don't know, but I just feel like I think he's too young. The kid.
You kind of like Jay Baruchel? I always mess up the last name.
Jay, but I just don't think that he's as good of an actor as Crispin Glover. And that's the thing. Tall, thin. I mean, he can be. We can go different body type for George. I just don't know who you cast as a perfect George McFly. in a.
And that is a testament, and maybe that's why we end it here, and we say that is a testament to how good that casting was, because like I don't know what would they do, like who, unless you go unknown and you really find someone that becomes a star, and there's probably someone out there that would just do amazing that we just haven't heard of, and doesn't have the baggage of like, oh, some people don't like, Paul Rudd or whoever we were throwing out there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's leave that one. Let's leave it at that. Let's leave it to the fans to decide that one. Help us cast the movie. But this is Back to the Future 2020. And my guest, Kevin Smets, the Inner Geekdom
Directed by Jon Favreau.
Directed by Jon Favreau.
That was fun, man.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you so much. The Inner Geekdom champion of the world. You can find him on Twitter at Kev Smets. That's SMETS. And you can see him defending.
Me for Lady Gaga.
Right. And you can see him defending his Inner Geekdom championship coming up here soon against the number one contender, Amazing Mark Knopic. Looking forward to your season coming up in season 7 of the Movie Trivia Schmodown. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. And I'm looking forward to seeing if any studio in their right mind will make this movie.
Yes. I mean, I also agree with you what you have said that, reboot it, because I still have the original. Or do a sequel where they find the blueprints and, bring back and have Marty be the crazy whack one. Whatever. Like, there's whatever they do, because the video game, the Telltale game, proved that you could have a good story like that. I love those. You can watch the 3-hour version of that. But I'm on the side of you, and just talking with Back to the Future always makes me like it even more. So talking it with you, you always enhance my fandom of it. So I always thank you for that. And thanks for having me on here, and I agree. I mean, I say I'm looking forward to that musical. That's for another show, but thanks for having me on the show, and man, it's been a pleasure, and I could talk Back to the Future with you all the time.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming on and giving me some of your time, and we will definitely be talking more with Kevin Smets here in the future on Back to the Future, the podcast,
or the past.
Or the past. You don't know. Kevin, thanks so much, man.
All right, thanks, dude.
And that was Kevin Smets and I's recasting of Back to the Future. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, send hate tweets to our way at Brad Gilmore, at Kev Smets on Twitter. Let us know who you think would be a good Marty McFly, George McFly. Man, how hard is that one? Lorraine, Jennifer, Biff, Doc. Let us know right now and send those tweets over. Give us a follow over there on Twitter too, at Brad Gilmore, at BTTF Podcast. You can find out more about Back to the Future podcast over there and pre-order my book, Back from the Future, a celebration of the greatest time travel story ever told, on backfromthefuturebook.com or on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and IndieBound.com. But until next time, until next week, I'm Brad Gilmore, and I will see you in the future.
Oh, Brad, what have you done now? Oh, Brad, what have you done now?